The Galactic Council chamber of Valders Prime had never smelled like wet dog before. Ambassador Elena Gay was aware of this. She was also aware of the 47 alien dignitaries staring at the creature currently attempting to eat her left shoe. She cleared her throat, tugged gently at the leash. The golden retriever puppy, 8 weeks old, 17 pounds of floppy ear and unearned confidence, looked up at her with absolute adoration, a thin strand of drool connecting his lower jaw to her diplomatic boot. "General Ranger," she said quietly, "we are representing our species." General Ranger sneezed on her boot, then wagged his tail so hard his entire back half became a blur. From the elevated dais to her left, High Consul Vreth of the Keth'ar Dominion let out a sound like a grinding millstone. The Keth'ar were 9 feet of segmented chitin and biological spite. Their entry for the Apex Predator Showcase had arrived in a sealed containment cylinder and had already tried to melt through the glass twice. "This," Vreth said, his translation collar rendering his tone with painful precision, "is a joke." "It is not," Ambassador Gay said pleasantly. "You have brought a juvenile of what appears to be a livestock guardian. Companion animal. Actually, though the distinction may not translate. The chamber was enormous. Carved from a single mountain of bioluminescent rock, its vaulted ceiling lost in blue-green haze. 12 species had gathered for the Conclave of Strength, an ancient ritual that predated the Council itself. Every 100 cycles, each member civilization presented its world's apex predator, proof of the crucible that had shaped their species, evidence of the evolutionary pressure that had forged their warriors, their instincts, their indomitable will. It was, Ambassador Gay reflected, essentially a very expensive bragging competition. The Vorrkai had brought something that resembled a storm-given skeleton, a crackling mass of electromagnetic tissue that had already shorted out 3 translator units just by breathing. The Ghendali had presented a deep ocean horror with 17 independent nervous systems and the ability to change its molecular density at will. The Shul Collective's entry was technically a single organism occupying 47 separate bodies, and it was currently watching everyone in the room simultaneously. And then there was General Ranger, who had found a crumpled piece of ceremonial bunting on the floor and was having the time of his life. Sub-Ambassador Drevkalis of the Shul Collective drifted toward Elena during the pre-showcase reception. The Shul looked human, mostly. They'd chosen to wear bodies that roughly approximated bipedal form for diplomatic functions, but their eyes were the wrong color and they blinked in sequences that gave most species headaches. "We are curious," Drevkalis said. All 47 of them said it, in perfect sync from wherever they were standing around the room. "Most are," Elena said. "Your predator does not appear to be predating." Elena watched General Ranger attempt to climb into the lap of a Keth'ar honor guard who was approximately 12 times his size. The guard looked down with an expression that, even through the alien facial structure, read unmistakably as "what is happening to me." "He's 8 weeks old," Elena said. "He's doing exactly what he should be doing. He's doing nothing. He's being a dog. That's not nothing." She paused. "It's actually quite hard if you do it right." Drevkalis processed this in the particular way that she'll process things. You could see it, a ripple of consultation passing through their distributed mind. The Conclave of Strength exists to demonstrate apex predation, evolutionary supremacy, the fong of a civilization. Elena smiled. "I know. Then you understand that humanity will be judged." "Oh, I'm counting on it," she said. The showcase began at the 3rd toll of the Valders bell. Each species presented an order of galactic seniority. The Keth'ar's containment cylinder was cracked open to gasps and the rapid evacuation of a 15-meter radius. What emerged was something that had evolved in volcanic cave systems with no light, no warmth, and apparently no sense of proportion about its own lethality. It killed one of the display drones just by looking at it. Everyone applauded. The Vorrkai electromagnetic horror was demonstrated at partial power, behind 3 layers of shielding, and still managed to make everyone's hair stand on end. The Ghendali creature shifted through 4 states of matter in quick succession before its handlers calmed it down. Elena sat in the human delegation box with General Ranger on her lap and scratched behind his ears and waited. By the time the Shul Collective presented their 47-bodied organism doing something that appeared to violate 3 laws of physics simultaneously, the mood in the chamber had reached a particular pitch, that specific vibration of collective testosterone and adrenaline that occurs when apex predators gather and begin measuring themselves against each other. Elena had read the pre-briefing notes. She knew what came next in the Conclave's traditional schedule. She also knew what didn't appear in those notes. She knew about the sleeper. The sleeper was in the briefing materials only as a footnote, buried in an appendix from the Valdres Planetary Survey from 600 years ago. Note: the conclave chamber sits above a significant geomagnetic anomaly. Long-duration psychic resonance events have been documented at this site. Inhabitants report vivid dreams and heightened aggression. The source appears to be a dormant entity of significant psychic mass. Estimated probability of awakening during any given conclave: 0.003%. Elena's predecessor had flagged it. Elena's predecessor's predecessor had flagged it. No one had done anything about it, because 0.003% felt very small right up until it didn't. She had brought General Ranger for several reasons. She was about to need all of them. It began as a feeling, not a sound, not a sight. A feeling, the specific variety that evolution had been installing in nervous systems for 1 billion years to communicate one primal message. Something is here, and it is so far above you on the food chain that prey is the kindest word it has for you. Several delegates stopped mid-sentence. The Keth'ar honor guards chitined and rattled. All of it, at once, a sound like 1,000 pieces of armor shifting simultaneously. Elena felt it in her teeth first, then in her chest, then behind her eyes, a pressure that built and wasn't pain exactly, but was adjacent to pain the way a tsunami is adjacent to a wave. The psychic entity woke up. Later, the Valdres Council would spend considerable resources trying to describe what happened next. The best they managed was this: the entity did not attack. It did not act with malice or intent. It simply was, and its existence was so incompatible with consciousness that proximity to it felt like drowning. It broadcast nothing except its own fundamental nature, ancient, vast, terrifying, and that broadcast hit every nervous system in the chamber like a physical blow. The Keth'ar diplomat screamed. Not a word, not a statement, just sound, the pure involuntary vocalization of an animal confronted with something that all its evolution, all its warrior culture, all its centuries of proud dominion history had never prepared it for. The Shul Collective shattered into component bodies and scattered. The Vorrkai collapsed into a ball of static discharge, all cognitive function apparently suspended. The Ghendali representative reverted fully to predator mode and attacked the nearest moving thing, which was unfortunately the chandelier. 47 alien dignitaries, some of the most formidable beings in the known galaxy, representatives of species that had conquered their worlds, fought their wars, and built their empires, and every single one of them was breaking. Ambassador Elena Gay sat very still in the human delegation box. The pressure in her skull was immense. The terror was real, not metaphorical, not psychological, but real, a direct broadcast into the limbic system, the ancient brain, the part of every thinking being that remembered being small and soft and mortal and eaten. She could feel it trying to find a grip. She looked down. General Ranger was looking up at her. He had no idea. He genuinely had absolutely no idea. His tail was going. His ears were slightly lopsided, one up, one down, that delightfully asymmetric look he got when he was paying careful attention. He had his head tilted at 11 degrees. His eyes said, with complete sincerity, "You're my favorite thing. What are we doing? I'm having a wonderful time. Is this a game?" He licked her wrist. Elena took a breath. She thought, he needs water every 2 hours. She thought, his next meal is at 6 o'clock. She thought about the specific weight of him on her lap, warm and dense and ridiculous, the way his paws were still slightly too big for his body. She thought about the walk they'd taken this morning on the landing platform. and how he tried to eat a piece of Valdris gravel and then immediately looked betrayed by it. The entity howled, or rather, the entity was, and that being pressed against her consciousness like a wall of static and ancient dark. Elena scratched behind General Ranger's ear. His tail wagged harder. One thing, she thought. One true thing. He is here. He is warm. He had breakfast. He is content. The entity pushed. Elena held. Around her, the chamber had descended into chaos. The Shoal Collective's distributed body was gibbering in 47 directions. The Keth'ar High Council had pressed himself against the wall and was making sounds that his translation collar couldn't parse because they weren't language anymore. The Ghendali creature had been stunned by emergency systems. 3 different species were openly weeping, and Elena Gay, Ambassador Plenipotentiary of the United Earth Council, sat in the human delegation box and watched her puppy try to figure out if a diplomatic credential badge was food. It was not food. He tried anyway. He remained convinced there was a reality in which it was food. She focused on that. The entity raged. She focused on General Ranger, deciding the badge was not food, but perhaps a toy, and beginning to systematically destroy it. She focused on the weight of him, the smell of him, the entirely unremarkable, entirely specific, entirely real fact of him existing on her lap at this particular moment. The entity screamed. She thought about his water bowl. It took 11 minutes. 11 minutes of psychic assault at a level that had reduced 11 species' finest minds to their most primal, most terrified states. And then the entity, finding insufficient purchase in one particular human consciousness, found its resonance disrupted. Psychic entities. The Valdris xenophysicists would explain later in reports that would become required reading at diplomatic academies for the next 3 centuries. Cannot sustain their broadcast against an anchor. A mind that is truly occupied, not suppressing the fear, not armoring itself, not exerting will against the wave, but simply elsewhere, attending to something small and real and true. That mind cannot be seized. You cannot terrify a consciousness that is, at its core, focused on whether a puppy has had enough water. The entity subsided. The pressure released. The chamber was a wreck. Delegates from 11 civilizations sat or lay or pressed themselves against walls in various states of dissociation. The Keth'ar High Council's translator collar was still trying to render his vocalizations. The Shoal were slowly, carefully reconsolidating into functional units. Elena stood up, set General Ranger on the floor, unclipped his leash so he could properly explore, and walked to the podium. She waited until people were listening. The Conclave of Strength, she said, asks each civilization to present its apex predator, the creature that sits at the top of its world's food chain, the evolutionary champion that shaped your species into what it is today. General Ranger was investigating the Keth'ar High Council's boot. The consul looked down at him with an expression of profound bewilderment. I want to be transparent with you all, Elena continued. General Ranger is not Earth's apex predator. He's a puppy. He is 8 weeks old. He was, until recently, primarily focused on whether he could eat a specific rock. She paused. He could not. He remains interested in trying. Several delegates who had been weeping were now watching the puppy with something that was not quite what they'd been feeling 11 minutes ago. Earth's apex predator, technically, is humanity. We can discuss the ecological resume later. We've driven a significant percentage of competing megafauna to extinction. We've altered the planet's chemical composition with our industry. We sit at the top of every food chain we've entered. She let that sit for a moment. We are, by most metrics, quite frightening. In the traditional conclave sense, we qualify. She looked around the chamber. But that's not what we brought, because that's not what we are. She found the Keth'ar consul's eyes. He was, she noticed, very carefully not moving his boot, because General Ranger had decided to sit on it. What we brought is this, the thing that keeps us, not what we evolved from, what we evolved toward. 11 minutes ago, an entity of significant psychic mass attempted to reduce this chamber to its constituent animal fears. And it failed, not because of any weapon, any warrior culture, any evolutionary supremacy. It failed because a dog needed scratching behind his ears, and that was a more real and present thing than ancient cosmic terror. The chamber was completely silent. "We are not a species defined by our fawn," Elena said. "We are a species that domesticated wolves, that decided, somewhere in the Pleistocene, that the thing we wanted to keep close wasn't the weapon, it was the companion. And in doing so, we accidentally built the single most effective psychological anchor in the known galaxy." She smiled. "Turns out, you can't terrify someone who's thinking about their dog." General Ranger had fallen asleep on the Keth'ar High Consul's boot. The consul looked down at him for a long moment. Then, very slowly, with the careful deliberation of someone performing an action they would never in a million years have predicted performing, he reached down and placed one enormous chit in his hand next to the puppy. Not touching, just near. General Ranger's tail, even in sleep, gave a single, authoritative wag. The Conclave of Strength produced, for the first time in 600 years, a unanimous resolution. It was brief. It read, in its entirety, "Resolved, that the definition of apex predator be amended to include not only the organism that dominates its ecosystem through force, but also the organism that has demonstrated the capacity to domesticate force itself, and to find, in that act, something worth protecting. Humanity's entry is accepted. The puppy may stay." There was one amendment, added by the Keth'ar delegation and seconded without dissent. Additionally resolved, that the Conclave's traditional pre-demonstration reception shall henceforth include a brief period during which General Ranger may be introduced to interested delegates. Attendance at this portion of the agenda is strongly encouraged. The Keth'ar High Consul Vreth has indicated he will be present. Later, in the diplomatic shuttle on the way back to the human cruiser, Sub-Ambassador Drevkalis of the Shul Collective opened a channel. All 47 of them looked slightly rumpled, in the way that distributed intelligences sometimes did when they'd had a difficult afternoon. "We have a question," they said. In unison. "Go ahead," Elena said. "Do all humans have one of these?" She looked at General Ranger, who was asleep at her lap with his paws in the air and his mouth slightly open. "Not all of them," she said, "but most eventually. She'll process this for a moment. And does it always work? The anchor?" "No," Elena said honestly. "Humans break too. We have terrible days. We lose people. We face things that are too big and we fall apart just like everyone else. But then, she said, we come home, and there's a warm thing that is extremely glad to see us. And we remember what we're made of." She scratched behind General Ranger's ear. He kicked one leg in his sleep. "It doesn't make us invincible. It makes us recoverable, which in the long run amounts to the same thing." The show were quiet for a moment. Then, very quietly, in a voice that carried 47 frequencies at once, "We think we would like to learn more about dogs." Elena smiled. "I think," she said, "that can be arranged." General Ranger went on to serve 12 years of active diplomatic duty. He attended 43 councils, 2 peace negotiations, and 1 incident that technically constituted a first contact scenario with a previously unknown Silicon-based civilization, which he handled by sitting on the senior xenobiologist's feet until everyone calmed down. He was awarded the United Earth Council's Medal of Distinguished Service. The ceremony was very dignified. He ate the ribbon.